Hi, Hugo here. I recently got to climb with Amanda Watts in the Blue Mountains. Amanda is an excellent climber as well as a professional dietitian and nutritionist. Hi, so Amanda, can you tell us a bit about your climbing background?
I started climbing when I was at uni. Went to the climbing gym once, loved it so much that I think I climbed every day for 2 years after that. Used to drive home from the climbing gym and couldn't really change gears because my hands were so sore and I was so pumped. And then I decided to go on a climbing trip across Australia and ended up in the Blue Mountains and I'm still here.
And what's the hardest climb that you've done that you're most proud of?
Probably Mr. Magoo, which is, it's only a 27 at Diamond Falls, but I was so scared on that climb and it was a real mental battle. There was nothing physically stopping me from doing that route. But I just kept getting scared of falling off. And so it took quite a lot of mind control to be able to do that route. And that was really cool. And then it was fun climbing after that because you just sort of had your head in and you're in the zone.
What's the hardest one you've done?
Half Dome actually would be the hardest climb ever to do. It's in Yosemite Valley and it's a big multi-pitch. Yeah, I did it with an old climbing partner, Lee. And you have to climb, I think it's 26 pitches, and we tried to do it in a day. And my goal was to try and lead as many of the pitches as I could, and then he led the harder pitches. And then any pitch that I was seconding, I wanted to try and do free. And by the time you got to the last 3 pitches, you were just so smashed. It was like, just try and get to the top. It's just really satisfying. I think I like that type 2 fun stuff.
And what is your nutrition advice? Well, firstly, how did you get into nutrition?
I was in Horsham in the Grampians and I hurt my ankle climbing because I had a bad belaya that took me in too tight. Yeah, I think I just had a lot of time to think about how I was eating and how people ate, and just got really interested in, I think disordered eating was really interesting because so many climbers starve themselves, and I thought there just had to be a better way to do it, and I wanted to know how to do it.
And what is your nutrition advice for climbers?
I think that a lot of climbers try and play with their weight too much. I think they try and drop weight too fast and think it's going to be the be-all and end-all of their climbing. I think a lot of them try fad diets a bit too quickly, like the ketogenic diet or low carb. And I think at the end of the day, they need to try and fuel their bodies around their training really well and aim to eat as many veggies as they can.
And so how do you eat around training and going to competitions and going to crag?
I mean, eating around competition, you want to make sure that you've got food in your belly before you go into the comp that's going to be easy for your body to digest. Not too high fat, something that you're really used to eating. Have a couple of hours before the comp so that the nerves don't kick in. As soon as you start competing, the blood's going to get diverted from your stomach into, trying to get rid of the pump in your arms. So you don't want to have like a bacon and egg burger in your belly then. During the comp, you just want to try and fuel yourself as well as you can. So if you've got a comp that's longer than 2 hours, sometimes liquid food can be better. Like, it might be even an up and go or just some Gatorade to keep you going. And then if you've got a second round of competition in the afternoon, then you want to try and get something in that hasn't got too much fibre in it, but that is still low GI, so that you've got a bit of energy to last through the next part of the comp.
So what's like a meal structure look like?
So you definitely want to make sure you've got some carbohydrate at every meal and some protein at every meal. For us climbers, I think it's good to try and get about 20 grams of protein at breakfast, and then again at lunch and then at dinner, and then some close to training if your training is going to be away from a meal. Carbohydrate, you want to try and have some low GI carbohydrate, not like a white bread sandwich or cornflakes like I know lots of the junior climbers like to eat. So like we have, say, porridge for breakfast or peanut butter toast. I think people think that dietitians are going to tell them not to eat chocolate. You can eat lots of chocolate if you want to. You're just going to make sure you've got all the other stuff coming in as well. And around training and at the cliff, I think it's just about not feeling too hungry when you're climbing and keeping your energy levels up. Like, we can be at the cliff for a long time sometimes, and so I think making sure you've got some low GI carb and a little bit of protein. If you can get some veggies in, that's great, and not too much of the processed stuff, like things like Red Bulls and Mothers and that sort of stuff. I think, maybe you use it in a comp, but otherwise try and keep the nutrition at the crag really good and clean.
So like, what's an example of a good meal, a good, say, lunch?
At the cliff or just in general?
Just in general.
So if you're a bread person, then some grainy bread or some sourdough bread. If you're going for a vegetarian kind of thing, then the protein you'd put in might be hummus or tahini. If you're a fish person, tuna or salmon. We try not to have meat twice a day, so you might decide you're going to have some meat at lunch. It might be some chicken or something like that. Some veggies, so you might put some capsicum and some cucumber and tomato. You could make that into a salad instead and have one of those little microwave rice keep cups, or you could put some couscous with it or some quinoa. and then any dressing or avocado or something yummy that makes it a bit tastier.
Yeah. And is there any special advice for younger climbers?
I think it's really important to try and keep your climbing fun. So, you know, I think these days there's a lot of Instagram and social media. When I started climbing, there wasn't so much of that. And, you know, sponsorship and all of the things that go with that. I think just trying to make sure every time you go outdoors and pull on, that you're having as much fun as possible. Yeah. And I think trying to climb sometimes with climbers that have climbed a lot. So, you know, getting out with climbers that are putting up new routes and that are climbing the grades you want to climb, so that you can see what they do. And so you get out of the gym and get onto the rock. In terms of food, I think, you know, it's a junk food world now. There's so much food that's out there that's just rubbish. And so getting as much information about what it is that's good to eat and avoiding the fad diets as much as possible, I think is really good.
Do younger climbers need to eat more than older people, or because they're still growing, or less?
Yep. So if you're, now let me think, is it between about 16 and 18 or 14 and 18, your energy requirements are quite a bit higher, and then they drop down a little bit, you know, from a basal metabolic rate point of view. And so yes, when you're in that growth phase and when your height hasn't plateaued, you haven't hit your sort of man muscles yet, then, or your like girl muscles, then yes, your requirements are probably about 2,000 kilojoules higher. And then in your early 20s, they'll drop down again. Yep.
And how do you know if you're not eating enough to support your training?
I think if you're not recovering from your training sessions well enough, if your training is properly set up and you're not seeing any gains, and if you're getting injured and if you're getting sick, I think those are the core things that can tell you that you're not eating enough to support it, or you're not eating the right things to support it.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Amanda. Well, I hope you learned a lot from that. If you want more personal nutrition advice, you can access Amanda's details right here. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.